your boy young I give him that thing. Punch leg stay, punch America. Banyi dua, punch leg stay, punch America. Banyi dua, wo koji leg kankaro watana watchin. Oga leg juir pa oga leg panda wadia punch America. Banyi dua bano chingu tongo pandon kujuir baya cheka. Paku panda juir wadia bi Panchi America, Panji Dwala, Panta Leg
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lake State Media. My name is Abraham Jok. I'm one of the Lake State Media hosts. My guest for this evening is Dr. Jok Madut Jok. We will be talking about the breaking news going on in Northern Sudan. So while we are waiting, for those of you turning in, thank you. And I would like you guys to start sharing the video. And also, too, we will be live on Facebook and YouTube. So while we're waiting for the people turning in, so I will be a little bit play the music, and then we will start our program. I would like to welcome Dr. Jok Madut to Let's Say Media again, your second time. And this is the important night. We South Sudanese and Northern Sudanese can talk about the issues going on in Northern Sudan. Anything that affected Northern Sudan will affect us as a human being. So that is a question, and I will be introduce my my guests, and then while we're waiting, please start sharing the video, and I will start playing little music. Thank you.
These are the South Sudan voices, brought to you by Ruka Music.
Share the video, guys. Share.
Abutumon mutu chado mon fikapa igaba Julio umon gikorele le asan kagali abutumon girita wokyalde satumai to mama kole papa yalde adatom samala andate.
It sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, so while Dr. Madut, before I give you a floor, let me play the audio of General Abdul. So when he press release, so I want to play that. It's about 8 minutes long and 42 seconds. So let me play that, and then we'll start our discussion.
Okay.
وبركاته. أحييكم تحية عز وشموخ ومهابة مستوحاة من عزة وشموخ شعب السودان. في نصف قرن من الزمان وقف العالم 3 مرات يكتب في تاريخه أن الشعب السوداني رفض أن يحكمه فرد أو فئة لا تؤمن بالحرية والسلام والعدالة. لذلك عندما هتف شباب ثورة ديسمبر المجيدة بهذه الشعارات واحتشد الآلاف منهم أمام القيادة العامة للقوات المسلحة، استجابت القوات المسلحة وعزمت من وقتها العمل على تحقيق حلمهم في بناء الوطن الذي جوهره هذه الشعارات: الحرية والسلام والعدالة، بالقناعة التامة بأن شباب وأهل السودان يستحقون أن يكون لهم وطن يحلم بتحقيق هذه الشعارات فيه. يؤكد مضي القوات المسلحة في إكمال التحول الديمقراطي حتى تسليم قيادة الدولة لحكومة مدنية منتخبة تحقق لهم طموحهم في هذه الشعارات. شرعية الفترة الانتقالية ظاهرة ضامت على أساس مرحلي، هو التراضي المتزن بين الشركاء العسكريين والمدنيين للسير في طريق الانتقال حتى الوصول إلى التفويض الشعبي بموجب انتخابات عامة. من خلال الممارسة التي امتدت لأكثر من عامين انقلب التراضي المتزن إلى صراع بين مكونات الشراكة، قاد بلادنا ومكوناتها المختلفة إلى انقسامات تنذر بخطر وشيك يهدد أمن الوطن ووحدته وسلامة أرضه وشعبه. وتأكد وشهد بذلك السيد رئيس الوزراء الدكتور عبدالله حمدوك في مبادراته التي أطلقها في يوليو وأكتوبر من هذا العام، مما استوجب على القوات المسلحة بصفتها السلطة المؤسسة لهذه الفترة ومن منطلق مسؤولياتها الوطنية في حماية أمن وسلامة البلاد كما ورد في الوثيقة الدستورية للفترة الانتقالية وقانون القوات المسلحة، حيث أن ما تمر به بلادنا الآن أصبح مهدد حقيقي وخطر يهدد أحلام الشباب ويبدد أمل الأمة في بناء الوطن الذي بدأت تتشكل معالمه، وبدأنا معا نخطو نحو دولة المواطنة والحرية والسلام والعدالة، إلا أن تشاكس بعض القوى السياسية وتكالبها نحو السلطة والاصطفاف الجهوي والعنصري والتحريض على الفوضى والعنف دون اهتمام يذكر بالمهددات الأمنية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية التي أطبقت على كل مناحي الحياة ومفاصل الدولة. كان نظام العينة في القوات المسلحة والدعم السريع والأجهزة الأمنية الأخرى أن نستشعر الخطر ونتخذ الخطوات التي تحفظ مسار ثورة ديسمبر المجيدة حتى بلوغ أهدافها النهائية في الوصول لدولة مدنية كاملة عبر انتخابات حرة ونزيهة. عليه ولتصحيح مسار الثورة تقرر الآتي: أولاً إعلان حالة الطوارئ في جميع أنحاء البلاد. ثانياً التمسك الكامل والالتزام التام بما ورد في الوثيقة الدستورية الفترة الانتقالية للعام 2019 واتفاق سلام السودان الموقع في جوبا في أكتوبر من العام 2020. ثالثاً تعليق العمل بالمواد 11 12 15 16 24 3 71 72 من الوثيقة الدستورية مع الالتزام التام بالاتفاقيات والمواثيق الدولية التي وقعت خلال فترة الحكومة الانتقالية. رابعاً حل مجلس السيادة الانتقالي وإعفاء أعضائه. خامساً حل مجلس الوزراء. سادساً إنهاء تكليف ولاة الولايات. سابعاً إعفاء وكلاء الوزارات. ثامناً مكلف المدراء العامين في الوزارات والولايات بتسيير دولاب العمل. تاسعاً وأخيراً تجميد عمل لجنة إزالة التمكين حتى تتم مراجعة منهج عملها وتشكيل على أن تكون قراراتها نافذة وخاضعة للإجراءات القانونية. يستثنى من هذه الإجراءات الالتزامات واستحقاقات سلام السودان الموقع في جوبا في أكتوبر 2020. إننا نؤكد أن هنالك مظالم تاريخية لأهلنا في الشرق الحبيب كما في معظم ولايات السودان الكثير من مطلوبات الحرية والسلام والعدالة التي تتطلب منا جميعا العمل سويا للوصول لحلول دائمة وممكنة تلبي أشواق وطموحات أهلنا وتعالج جذور المشاكل في ربوع بلادنا الحبيبة. إننا نؤمن بأن هذه الثورة العظيمة ماضية بعون الله وبإيمان الشباب الذين صنعوها، ونؤكد لهم أننا لن نحيد عن الأهداف والمهام المنصوص عليها في المادة 8 من الوثيقة الدستورية للفترة الانتقالية. فلنعمل جميعا اعتبارا من اليوم وحتى قيام الانتخابات العامة في يوليو من العام 2023 على تحسين معاش الناس وتوفير الأمن والطمأنينة لهم وتهيئة المناخ والبيئة المناسبة للأحزاب لتعمل من أجل الوصول للموعد المحدد للانتخابات وهي أكثر جاهزية واستعداد لتولي قيادة الدولة. ستتولى إدارة شؤون البلاد حتى بعد الانتخابات حكومة من كفاءات وطنية مستغلة يراعى في تشكيل هياكلها التمثيل العادل لكل أهل السودان وأطيافه وفئاته. سنحرص على إكمال مطلوبات العدالة والانتقال، مفوضية صناعة الدستور، مفوضية الانتخابات، مجلس القضاء العالي، المحكمة الدستورية، مجلس النيابة قبل نهاية شهر نوفمبر من العام الحالي. كذلك سنشرك الشباب والشابات الذين صنعوا هذه الثورة في قيام برلمان ثوري يراقب ويقف على تحقيق أهداف ثورته التي ضحى من أجلها رفاقهم وإخوانهم. إننا نرجو من الجميع الالتفاف حول بناء الوطن والعمل والإنتاج، فأهلنا وبلادنا يستحقون أن نضحي لأجلهم ونسعى لحمايتهم ونصون كرامتهم ونرعى حقوقهم. نؤكد مرة أخرى على التزامنا التام بما ورد بالوثيقة الدستورية وبما تضمنته اتفاقية السلام مع حركات الكفاح المسلح في جوبا. وهنا نجدد الدعوة للأخوة القائد عبد العزيز الحلو والقائد عبد الواحد محمد نور للانضمام لركب بناء السودان الجديد، سودان الحرية والسلام والعدالة، سودان لن تفرض عليه مرة أخرى أي حزب أو فئة رؤيتها أو فكرها. شكرنا الجزيل لجيران وأشقاء السودان وأصدقائه الذين ظلوا على الدوام يقدمون الدعم والمساندة لإنجاح الفترة الانتقالية. التحية لكم شعبنا الصابر الصامت، وأنتم تبذلون الغالي والنفيس من أجل رفعة واستقرار هذا الوطن. التحية لكم إخوتي منسوبي القوات النظامية، وأنتم تحرسون أرض وسماء السودان وتسهرون لحماية شعبه في الحضر والبوادي. اللهم ارحم شهداءنا الأبرار واشفي جرحانا الأخيار. اللهم أنت القادر لما تريد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
All right, thank you. There you have it. Yes, so that is a voice of General Abdul. He's announced in his, you guys hear it, even though I don't speak Arabic very well, I grabbed some of the word. So as we know what's going on is in Northern Sudan. In April 2019, there was a civilian went out and demanding former President Umar al-Bashir as removed. And the civilian and the military, they share power. And then again, last month, there was a failed coup going on. And then lead into this crisis for today. Yesterday, like on Saturday, there was 10,000 civilians went out for protests in Khartoum. And then on Monday today, and then the military come out and announced that they detained Prime Minister and the other government official that they arrested them. So, Dr. Jok, welcome to Legislative Media again. What do you can you give us an insight what's going on in Northern Sudan?
Hello again. Happy to be back, and greetings to your viewers. But I think while one may not be able to speak authoritatively on the events, because the events are fast happening and one doesn't know exactly in terms of the evolution of the events themselves, but one can comment on the impact of these events going forward, both within Sudan, but also regionally. We know that Prime Minister Hamdok, who is now in detention together with his family in an unknown location, is a very popular person. People wanted him to steer the ship, this rocky ship of Sudan, towards democracy. He is also the current chair of IGAD cycle, the Intergovernmental Agency on Development, the Horn of Africa trade bloc, which has been also in charge and of other volatile situations in the region, including South Sudan's ongoing implementation of the peace process, the situation unfolding between Somalia and Kenya, the situation in Ethiopia and the war in the north. So the the announcement we have just heard from Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the head of the Transitional Military Council in Sudan, in essence the ruling body, uh, really is ominous for people who live in all these countries that I have enumerated. Ominous in the sense that what is going on in Sudan is most likely going to have reverberations and impact in the region, most particularly with regards to the relationship between Sudan and South Sudan. You will know that the peace agreement in Sudan, which brought into the current transitional government between the rebel groups in various parts of Sudan, including the SPLM North in Darfur, in Kordofan and in Blue Nile, and also the Darfur, was sponsored by Juba, by the government of South Sudan. By the same token, the so-called revitalized uh, uh, transitional government in Juba is the peace process that brought it about was also sponsored by Khartoum. So you have two countries that are connected, intertwined by history and by political dynamics. You will also recall that last month the Sudan government declared that the borders between Sudan and South Sudan will now be open or reopened so that population movement can happen, so that goods can happen. You will also not forget that South Sudan's oil industry, which is the biggest pillar of the economy of South Sudan, can only happen if there is stability in Sudan, because oil passes through Sudan to the exporting port in Port Sudan. So whatever is happening in Sudan is very much a serious concern for people in the region, just as much as we are all worried about the people of Sudan themselves, people who have struggled to topple a 30-year dictatorship which had destroyed their country. And so one can say that what Abdel Fattah al-Burhan just declared on TV now, uh, including the dissolution of the transitional government, the arrest of ministers, the appointment of director generals in the ministries to run the country for the time being, the dissolution of the transitional legislature, all of these things that he has just announced were not particularly surprising, but they are still shocking that that it has only just been more than 2 years since al-Bashir was toppled. They are not shocking because a lot of people knew. They are not surprising because a lot of people knew all along, or at least there was a widespread suspicion that while al-Bashir has gone, the fact that you have Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the guy who used to be the Inspector General of the Sudan Armed Forces during all those years of violence and genocide, and Muhammad Daglo, also known as Hameti, the guy who was the head of Rapid Support Force, the militia that stood side by side with the army of Sudan to create chaos, mayhem, genocide, and destruction in Darfur. The fact that these two men and other army generals remain in control has always produced this environment of suspicion that al-Bashir may have gone as an individual, but his system has remained. And that it might only be a matter of time before these military generals move in, take control of the state, and return it to the days when al-Bashir was ruling. So going forward, I think people will be watching whether this coup in Khartoum is indeed a step towards the return of al-Bashir or al-Bashir-like system, or whether the massive protests that we are seeing now all across Sudan that are protesting the coup, against the coup, whether they will prevail again the way they did in April 2019 to tell the army to stop and go back into the barracks and create a military, a civilian government once again. Whichever way it will happen, the fact is that Sudan is now more flagrantly divided between those people who are supporting the al-Bashir style military rule, which they toppled 2 years ago, and the civilian coalition government, which has been just set up as a result of the revolution. Which one is going to win? This is a serious situation, and we are all afraid for people of Sudan, and we, God forbid, that these divisions should escalate to a point where there is a confrontation between civilians themselves, let alone the confrontation between the military and the civilians. My fear is that Khartoum is now one of the most militarized capitals on the African continent. You have the army itself, you have the former rebel movements, the SPLM North, you have Sudan Liberation Movement from Darfur, you have Justice and Equality Movement from Darfur, you have many groups that have armed themselves over the years to contest the leadership and the distribution of resources in Sudan. Now, a lot of them are in Khartoum. This is completely different from the way it used to be, where the Sudanese elite from the riverine tribes, Zagawa, the Jalin, the Danagala, where you always pushing and outsourcing the war to the peripheries, so that it is Darfur, it is Kordofan, it is Blue Nile, it is the Red Sea Hills, which are experiencing war, but war has always been far away from them, from the elite, from their children were not the ones dying. Their economy continued to operate. Their people, their infrastructure has always remained intact, while the destruction is happening in those peripheries. This seems to be a situation now where that will no longer be the case. That instead of the peripheries dying and being destroyed, there is a likelihood that the presence of all these former rebel movements in Khartoum will now mean military confrontations within Khartoum. And so that might be a reason for the military junta that has just taken over to speed up the process of a return to a coalition or civilian government. Otherwise, having a Khartoum which is so militarized with the widespread of so many arms might not bode well for everyone in Sudan. We hope that it doesn't get to the point where the Sudanese people are fighting themselves on the streets of Khartoum. We hope that doesn't happen, but make no mistake about it, there is now a real threat to the integrity and the unity of Sudan. A lot of Sudanese, despite being upset with the departure of South Sudan into a separate country, They always thought, okay, fine, if the South has gone, maybe now this should be a wake-up call to the rest of Sudan to try to keep itself united by being diverse and accommodating in the distribution of power and resources. But this did not happen. So the fact that South Sudan has broken away is not only a signal to the rest, it is also a sign that if the remainder of Sudan, the Jalin, the Danakala, the Shaigia, the Aulad al Balad, as they call themselves, if they don't work hard to keep the country united and united on the basis of citizenship and equality, very likely the people in Nuba Mountains, the people in Bija, the people in Blue Nile, the people in far north Nubian, these people will probably begin to express the desire to move away and break away from the union, because they will not fold their hands and sit down and be absorbed and co-opted into the Arabized Sudanese state on the basis of first class and second and third class citizens. I don't think they will sit down. The
No.
people from Nuba Mountains, people from Kordofan, and people from Darfur, and people from Blue Nile, particularly, I don't think they will sit idle and watch their piece of the cake being fought over by Aulad al Balad to the exclusion of the peripheries. They will probably take advantage of this to assert themselves. I saw a statement just now from Mini Manawi of the Sudan Liberation Movement, uh, suggesting that he has been aware of the possibility of this coup happening. So we don't know what he's planning, but we know for sure he's planning. And that does not bode well for the unity of Sudan.
Thank you. Yes, and that would be a big, and that is, I see that this conflict going on in North Sudan will affect us as South Sudanese, because we are the sister countries, and you know that South Sudan oil is going through Red Sea. If there's crisis going on in Northern Sudan, there would be a possibility of the oil pipeline would be shut down, and this would bring a lot of issues. Can you talk a little bit more about what will be a impact of this crisis in Northern Sudan to South Sudan?
Well, the fact is that both Sudan and South Sudan need the oil flow to keep on, because both countries are reliant on oil proceeds, most particularly South Sudan. So I can imagine the new government, whether it is under the current military or whether there will be a transitional arrangement that is set up again, whatever political dispensation that happens in Sudan from tomorrow onwards, there is no question that they will want to continue the flow of the oil from South Sudan, because they get paid for South Sudan's oil, but also for themselves from within Northern Sudan to to the Red Sea. It is also this oil industry which is the nucleus of other types of international economic engagement. The Chinese are in Sudan, investing in Sudan because the oil can flow. There are others from near the region, particularly Saudi Arabia and UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar, who have also made investments in Sudan, especially with regards to land, and who have also been eyeing South Sudan as a potential investment destination, especially in agriculture, animal husbandry, and wildlife, and so forth. If the situation in Sudan remains volatile, to discourage international investors, whether from within the Middle East, from within Africa, or from further afield, the fact is that the economics will be the death knell for both governments. The more delay for these investments, the harder the economic situation, especially that now we heard that the international community, including the United States government, have stopped the funding that was going to flow into Sudan. There was $700 million from the United States that was going into various operations, including humanitarian. I just saw a statement today that the United States State Department has ordered to cease that the flow of that money, which means in the next few days things are going to be extremely hard in Sudan. And the harder they get in Sudan, the more difficult things will be in South Sudan. Because South Sudan is a major recipient of Sudanese trade supplies. A lot of construction material from Sudan, a lot of food items from Sudan, a lot of trade and business being done in South Sudan today is being done because of supplies from Sudan. For up to 50% of the trade that goes on in South Sudan currently, the supplies are coming from Sudan. The other 50% comes from the East African countries. So if you calculate the impact of the damage the current situation will do to the economy of Sudan and the economy of South Sudan, and you calculate that honestly, you can't imagine South Sudan being able to carry on for much longer if Sudan remains in turmoil. So I will expect that the government in Juba will be engaging with the new government in Khartoum to see what can be done during the period when the situation in Sudan is being worked out. What can be done in terms of continuation of economic exchanges? Um, it is in the interest of Juba that Khartoum is stable. Uh, you will have also seen the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of South Sudan on the situation in Juba. What the statement says, uh, coming from the minister himself on behalf of the president, is that uh, Juba is keenly watching the events unfolding in Sudan and very much concerned about the outcome of those events. That Juba sends its wishes uh, to the Sudanese people that they may find ways to dialogue over whatever disagreements they have rather than risking a return to war. The statement is talking about how the government of South Sudan and the people of South Sudan will continue to stand by Sudanese in whatever difficult times they go through. The statement is very mild and says nothing, in effect. It is vague enough so that it doesn't have any repercussions should the current military takeover become hostile to Juba. Juba doesn't want to come out and condemn it the way that the African Union has condemned the coup in Sudan. Juba doesn't want to condemn it openly because they are afraid if they condemn it in the strong terms, maybe that condemnation will come to hurt them when the new government in Sudan is established. So they stay out of being clear. It's clear enough to suggest that the South Sudanese government and its people are there to offer whatever help and support they will be expected or required to give to the Sudanese people. So you see, that is the kind of a delicate situation that Juba is having to weigh, not to be too critical and not to be silent either. And that can tell you the weight and the value of Sudan in the survival of South Sudan. And I think going forward, the people in Juba, the government in Juba, is going to continue to observe the situation in Sudan and observe it from afar, and restrain from issuing any final statements, but continue to offer its services should they be needed.
Yeah, thank you for that good analysis. And also, too, if Northern Sudan is not able to, because what we're seeing now, it will be a ruling like Muslim Brotherhood. I see Muslim Brotherhood is playing a role in the government, in this government. Well, if the military ruling coming back, and they will move, they will share with the civilian ruling. So what Northern Sudan government will be look like if the Muslim Brotherhood come back, like Sharia law and other, as we know, we have experience on that. So if that coming, if Muslim Brotherhood take over, what will be like?
Well, it is increasingly looking like the National Congress Party, or the National Islamic Front, as it used to be called. It seems that they have a hand in this coup,
Right.
and that the government to be set up following this coup is very likely going to look like the government where al-Bashir was the president, al-Turabi was the ideologue, and many other Islamists who were running that government for 30 years. I think that is really very likely going to be the color of this current dispensation going forward. But there is a saving grace in that the whole world had celebrated the revolution in Sudan in 2019, celebrated it on the basis that the Islamic government, the Islamic movement, will now be contained, such that it does no longer it ceases to sponsor terrorism, and that Sudan was in a serious economic situation of because of sanctions from the United States, from the rest of the global north, and these sanctions had squeezed Sudan so tightly that majority of people could not breathe. Only the handful of National Congress Party who had control of the apparatus of the state, and there was a deep state in Sudan where a small handful of people were now the ones in control of the money, and they were able to send this money abroad. Al-Bashir had money in Malaysia. A lot of these people who were in NCP had money in UK. A lot of them had money in the Arab world, in UAE, Qatar, and all these places. So that situation was so difficult for the ordinary Sudanese to sustain, which is part of the reason why the revolution succeeded. Sudan was also threatened by economic collapse because of the debt burden. At that time, Sudan had about 40 billion US dollars. Now it has about $27 billion in debt. So a government that comes to power, regardless of their political color or their ideological orientation, one thing that they are going to have to be sure about is to make sure that the Sudan doesn't go back into under sanctions, that Sudan does not get reinstated to the list of countries that sponsor terrorism, that Sudan does not return to the days when it was a pariah in terms of investment from outside. And so I think even if the Muslim brothers return to power, as it seems it's going to happen, I think they are going to be a lot more moderate in their policies than they have been under al-Bashir, because they cannot risk losing all that global goodwill which was expressed in 2019 and which translated into cash for the well-being of Sudan. And so I think, obviously, people have to be worried and concerned about a possibility of Sudan going back to the dark hour when it used to be a sponsor of terrorism, when it used the Islamic ideology to oppress people within Sudan itself, including most particularly the peripheries of Sudan. I don't think they will be so quick in returning to that state. That said, however, I do believe that Islamic ideology is a very effective political tool for this elite from the tribes I've just mentioned, Al Jalin, Al Danagala, and and uh, and all the rest of the riverine tribes, from Shendi all the way down, from Dungla all the way down to Medani, are these people who control the country. So the Islamic ideology, it does not have to be Islamic, but it is Islamic to the extent that it can be politicized. Use Islam to garner support for Muslims, but then use Islam as a tool to exclude so many other people, especially those people from those peripheries I mentioned. And that in itself is a risk to the unity and territorial integrity of Sudan going forward, I imagine. I don't think Al Burhan and Hameti, and by the way, Hameti is somebody that every Sudanese, most Sudanese suspect that he's not even Sudanese himself, that he's from Chad, because nobody knows where he came from. There was a story recently, a poem about where Hameti came from, because nobody remembers him as a high school student. Nobody remembers him in the universities, nor even in the armed forces. Where did he get trained? Nobody knows where he comes from. So the fact that people are suspicious about his origins, and that he has simply been utilized by his Muslim brothers as a force to suppress all the people in Darfur and all the other marginalized areas, is bound to inspire more and more Sudanese people to protest and rally and fight against this coup. As a matter of fact, I don't really believe that this coup is entirely a done deal, because if the people we are seeing now on the streets in northern Sudan, in all these different places, if these protests sustain and continue the way they did 2 years ago, I think they are going to force this military government to rethink its ways in the near future. Finally, let me just say that part of the reason for this coup to begin with is that Hameti and Al Burhan are afraid of what they have done in the past. Their involvement in the mayhem and the crises in Darfur, the genocide in Darfur, the war crimes and crimes against humanity. That if the transitional government was to succeed in reaching the elections in 2022, 2023, as was initially thought, and that a civilian and elected government was going to come to force, such that Al Burhan and Hameti lose that military power, they are afraid that they would have also been pursued for crimes in Darfur. And they are preempting that possibility to come to power to prevent the possibility of being indicted. Should this current coalition government succeed through the transitional period all the way to the time the elections are held and the Sudanese people make up, decide who their leaders are going to be, and that the government that would have come out of that would have been now in a place constitutionally to reconfigure and reorganize the military, which would have meant that the rapid support force of Hameti would have been dismantled.
And also, there is a call on pro-democrats. They are calling for former President Bashir to be handed over to ICC.
That's correct. And so, yeah, we saw there is definitely a strong fear that Hameti, Bashir, Burhan, and all the leaders of NCP who are now behind bars are seeing this coup, and they are probably behind this coup as a way to kill the ICC indictments and to return to power. Even if al-Bashir himself doesn't come back to be president, the government that can result from this coup is likely to be a government that will protect him and prevent him from being taken to ICC. And that is, I was talking to some Sudanese people, and they are saying that in fact the coup is exactly like the coup that happened in 1989, when the Muslim Brothers were behind it, but initially they came in and they arrested the Muslim Brothers like al-Turabi for a little bit of time, just to divert attention from themselves and to delude the people of Sudan. Then after a while, they all came out and became, and now the story was uncovered. It was similar in that it was similar to the situation that is unfolding now, where the Muslim Brothers are behind it, but they are making it look like it is purely a military nationalist movement. But then once they have taken power, all the Muslim Brothers will come out of the woodworks to now take control of the apparatus of the state, the way they did after June 30th, 1989, and therefore that fear, that possibility is most distressing and ominous to the forces of democracy, especially the revolution, the movement that toppled al-Bashir. They are all concerned that that Sudan should never be allowed to go back to that time. And so I think there is bound to be a major and volatile confrontation between the forces of democracy and the forces of the coup. The Doctors Union, which is a big professional association, have withdrawn their doctors from all the military hospitals throughout Sudan. So this is an indication that they are not going to take this coup lying down. They are going to try to challenge it. And the more people come out to challenge the coup, the more likelihood that there will be a confrontation, and that confrontation will most likely be very bloody. God forbid.
Yeah, I hope the military that took over probably going to think twice so that there will be no chaos.
Yeah.
When it's possibility, that's where things are going right now in northern Sudan. So another thing too, we need to talk about the issues of BA. So what is the effect of what will be the reason like a BA right now close when, and we thought that the military, the government that combined with the civilian, they will work toward a BA to see the issues of a BA. But now the government, the military is take over again.
Yeah,
so
I think
BA issues.
Yeah, I think there was definitely, as I have said on many forums over the years, if there was ever going to be an issue that will remain a thorn on the side of Sudan and South Sudan, and that might threaten a return to war, I think a BA is likely to be number one issue. in addition to all the other 7 major occupied areas of South Sudan that are occupied by Sudan. Abyei is probably going to be number 1 area that will cause war between Sudan and South Sudan. And that to avoid that war, the revolutionary government, the coalition government, had basically broached the Abyei issue with Juba, and it was likely that some negotiation and some understanding was going to develop out of that. Unfortunately, in my view, Juba has not pursued the question of Abyei with the same vigor that John Garang would have done. And so a lot of people are disappointed in the current government in Juba in the way it seems to look away from the issue of Abyei, and Abyei becoming ever more northern Sudanese territory, with so many Masseria moving into Abyei, with the topic even being covered up, and it's not a part of the conversation that goes on. But I think there was hope that if a level-headed government comes to power in Khartoum, a government that includes people like Malik Hagar, people like Abdullah Aziz, Adam Al-Helu, Yasser Arman, people from Darfur, if a coalition government or a government and a democratic government that comes to power, which will prioritize dialogue over military force, then all South Sudan's occupied territories can be negotiated with that government. But if this coup means a return of a kind of political leadership and military leadership that sees all these occupied territories as Sudanese property, Sudanese territories, then South Sudan definitely has a lot on its hands. Will it decide to pursue Abyei at all costs, including the possibility of fighting for it? Or will they compromise Abyei in exchange for stability in the rest of the country? I think going forward, there is definitely more fear now. If Hameti and Al-Burhan and other military leaders who are linked to the Muslim Brothers and who won the support of Al-Masiriya and Al-Zaygat, the Bagara, then I don't think they will relinquish Abyei very easily. And if Abyei is not returned, it will now be, the ball will be in the court of South Sudan, most particularly the people from Abyei themselves, what they are going to say. Are they going to give it up and move down south? Or are they going to stand up and fight for it? And meanwhile, looking at the rest of South Sudan, guys, we are going to fight for our territory. Are you going to see us go to war and not support us, or are you going to stand with us? I think this is a conversation, a two-way conversation that needs to happen. The dialogue with Sudan and the dialogue within South Sudan about what the fate of Abyei is going to be. The international community has spoken. The political maps of the region are clear. There is no question about who owns which territory between Sudan and South Sudan. The question now is whether South Sudan would be ready to get its territories back at all costs, including going to war. Most especially that South Sudan is faced with similar situations in many other borders, including the Lemi Triangle in Kenya and various territories with Uganda, and even with Central African Republic. We know that there are territories that belong to South Sudan but are occupied by people from that territory. Even Congo, I mean, the border with Congo, there are, I am aware of some territories that South Sudan does not control, where Congolese are operating. So South Sudan has a lot on its hands, and the situation in Khartoum does not make it any easier for them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing too. Uh, what is the role will Egyptian government will play with the Northern Sudan? Because the
Well,
Northern Sudan and yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, we know that the Arab countries, most particularly Egypt, uh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates,
Mm-hmm.
all are in favor of a military rule in Sudan, and perhaps are even behind the push for this coup. I'm not 100% confident in the documents and evidence to that effect, but
Mm.
I know that there is very likely scenario where Saudi Arabia and UAE want Sudan to be ruled by the military, because uh, those the military in Sudan is very much an ally with those countries regarding the war in Yemen.
Right.
So Sudan even has forces in Yemen that are supporting Saudi Arabia, and so a coalition civilian government in Sudan would be most likely unwilling to keep that military engagement. But a military government is likely to support that process and continue it in exchange for money and for military equipment from Saudi Arabia. So I have no doubt that Al-Sisi in Egypt wants a military rule, because he is a military person himself, and they seem to have a better understanding of how North Africa and the Middle East should be run.
Mm.
And I think it's not the position of Egypt does not bode well for the people of Sudan as the rest of the Sudanese people. As far as Saudi Arabia and UAE,
Mm.
they also have investments in Sudan, which were uh, investment in land and tourism, hospitality industry, banking, and loans that were advanced to Sudan during a military government. And the current civilian government, or the civilian government that could come after elections, might not be, will not honor some of these investments. At least that is how it is feared. And therefore, for these countries to continue to ensure their investments in Sudan, their bets are more with the military than with the civilians. So I think that is why these countries of the Middle East and Gulf countries would want a military ruler in Sudan rather than a civilian one.
Right. And another thing too, yes, that's really it will be a really uh it will be a long, and I'm afraid that it will be a civil war in Northern Sudan is coming up.
Yeah.
If
No,
people
that
should take over.
here
Yeah.
we hope that we hope that it doesn't get that far. But
Mm.
it is a genuine fear. In fact, some people from South Sudan might actually uh, will not be terribly sad if there is a war within Khartoum, particularly because the people in the peripheries of Sudan will say that finally the warmongers of Khartoum are having a dose of their own medicine, because they have always exported the war to the peripheries. But that now, if it comes back to their own neighborhoods, maybe for the first time, they would be willing to ensure that peace comes quickly, because they would not want that war to affect their children, to affect their infrastructure, to affect their service delivery. And since wars have always been fought so far away from Khartoum, they have never really felt close enough to warrant a desire for peace. And that if it was fought right within their neighborhoods, it will not be long before all the Sudanese people go on the streets and demand peace. So I think that will be the future. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Jok Madut, for this wonderful input. So before I let you go, my last question is, what advice will you give to South Sudan government to do on these issues? Because do government of South Sudan will support the military takeover, or do they will support civilians?
It's a difficult question, Madid. It's a difficult question even for the government itself, right? What I would say is that the government should study this situation very, very carefully and deploy all its available resources to understand the conflict, the situation in Sudan, such that whatever decision they make to support the coup or to stand against the coup, they have to weigh what is in it for South Sudan in either case, right? So is Sudan under the military better for South Sudan, or is Sudan under civilian rule better for South Sudan? I think this is a very weighty question and a real issue for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the security experts and diplomatic experts of Sudan to really join their powers, put their hands together to study this case. I would say that for the purpose of history, that South Sudan should really be seen prominently on the side of the Sudanese civilians, the Sudanese people, especially the revolutionary forces that topple al-Bashir. I think it is it's really good nature for South Sudan to be seen to be siding with that side, because it's a better look, it's better optics for South Sudan to side with the freedom forces, freedom and democracy forces that topple al-Bashir. But again, at the end of the day, governments are nothing if they are not animals of strategy and interest.
Right.
What South Sudan needs to do is to weigh its own interest very carefully before they make their bets one way or the other.
That's a very good advice.
Yeah.
That's a question that I will let you go. Jabril asking you that if Juba can join the SPLA North to fight the military in Khartoum. So that's a question that he has. Do you think?
I don't think it is really optimum at this moment for South Sudan to pursue any military action in Sudan, simply because the two countries are really linked at the hip, such that do unto me as you wish me to do unto you.
Right.
So it would be prudent for Juba to be a force for peace in Sudan rather than a force for conflict. If it so happens that SPLA North goes to war on its own accord, then that will be a different question. Then South Sudan will obviously have interest in continuing to be on the side of SPLA North, at least for historical connections, historical reasons, but also more importantly because of the borders. As PLA North is on the border, especially those in Kordofan and Blue Nile, and South Sudan certainly needs to support them, such that South Sudan remains having a kind of influence and a leeway on what happens going forward regarding the borders, particularly Hijlich or Fantau, but most definitely ABA and other occupied territories of South Sudan. And I think the more South Sudan is on good relations with the people on the New South border, the New South being, since South Sudan broke away, we now refer to Blue Nile, Kordofan, Darfur as the New South of Sudan. It is important that South Sudanese government and people continue good relationships with the people in the New South, because those are the people most determined, the most ubiquitous determinants of the future relationships between the two countries. And it is always better to invest more heavily on your neighbors than invest in people further afield.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jok Madut, for coming in and put your input and your. This is a very good that we learn very much. So because this is alarming, what's going on in Northern Sudan. We hope and we pray that these issues will not turn into a chaos, into a crisis, that there will be a second civil war in Northern Sudan, which will affect. Even though we are South Sudanese. Our families are there in Northern Sudan. Absolutely. And we are worried for them. That's safety. So we pray that there will be an alternative, that the government and the military, they can find a solution with the civilians so that they can form a new government that will not get out of their hand, so that we don't want to see the bloodshed again. So thank you so much for coming in. I will let you go. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Good day. Ciao.
Yeah, good night. Yeah. And thank you all for watching Lake State Media. For those of you tuning in, thanks so much. I have two people, Dr. Jok Madut and Ambassador Salam Dandara, supposed to be here, but for some reason I was expecting him to come, but he is not. Probably caught up with some issues. But that is the insight that we do. This is a breaking news. Lake State Media always, when there is a breaking news, we see the breaking news is an important thing that we have to discuss. We can come on live at any moment to update our public, because what's going on in Northern Sudan it can affect us in South Sudan, because Southern Sudan and Northern Sudan are sisters countries, and we have a tie, regardless of economic tie, regardless of relationship tie. Our families are in Northern Sudan, in Khartoum actually, and we are worried for them. We have refugees there. So this is a really challenging for two Sudan. So we pray that the issues going on in Northern Sudan, in Khartoum, will not turn into a bloodshed. And if we turn to the bloodshed in Khartoum, it will affect us in the South Sudan, as we already know that South Sudanese already have their own issues. So we hope the peace will be restored as soon as possible. We're calling the international community to weigh in so that they can talk to both parties, and civilian too, can be, because we know what it will be like now in the street on Juba, Khartoum, because we see that there is no phone, the network is not working in Khartoum. So we don't know how things going on right now. It's the night in Khartoum, almost at morning hours, and we don't know what's going on right now. We hope everything will be turned out, that it will be a lot of bloodshed or death. So that's a good. Thank you for watching us, and we will, if there is a more update, we can come back live and bring some of the people to talk more about it. Thank you for watching Lake State Media. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful morning wherever you are. Have a really nice. Thank you.
Panda, unigor unor kwe marunyaran yang pai get out gagwan my like a tirana gaje jo pai bonga blon tu binang ko the bagi ran tu biran gaje ubak mare jakule jo panda dore jakule banongo you gor ku bejongo dare jakule banongo tu paja bin lo ramu turun kong yang.
Thank you, brother Abial. Cherry. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I won't go to the creature the more tongue and young fight, get down, not going and my leg in a get a friend who never run a tube in uncle. The Iran, you Iran, the idea you look where a chocolate your panda, where a chocolate no more, you walk with your more, got a chocolate no more, keep my child, feel a little rum. Young guy, you got to
Thank you guys so much for watching Legacy Media. Have a wonderful night. We hope things will turn out okay tomorrow morning in Khartoum. If there's a breaking news, we will come live and update you guys. Thank you. Have a blessed night.
It's your boy, I'm giving that thing. Control like a stand, punchy America. Banyi doang, ban control like a stand, punchy America. Banyi doang, ban wo koji like kankaro watana watching. Oga level like juir pa ogara like panda wadia punchy America. Banyi doang bano chingitongo pandon kujuera baya cheka. Waktu panda juir wadia di. Panchi America, Panji Doan, Pan Legacy.
Okay, John Mayer, I see that you want to add something before I close up the show. Let me see if I can send you a link into, because I'm almost John Mayer. Let me give you a link very quick so you can come in and put in before I close up.
Ang cool giray rang may nang job sinaluker muker kumbeleng tulan mubat yang baik ketau kakoy mayan may lagi dilon agay ya ban wong beton tu binang koy ya bagi diran kedai je yubak mare jabuler jot panda jore jabuler banongo yut bor kubek jongo dari jabuler banongo kipaka bila lu kamu cool kong yang dai basong dan rai for you to barang wedai yak